Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Pac-Man here, and I am back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos once again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly and Tumbly Adventure for the Game Boy Advance. So, last time, we essentially did manage to fully complete Piglet's birthday, and overall, that particular birthday is really easy, especially noticeable, like I said before. It's basically a tutorial level, so no need to write to home about, and, you know, you probably get the idea for this point, because we've only just got started with this particular version of the game already, so no matter what though, it's about the fact that the majority of some stages in the game goes by for about under 30 minutes tops, so yeah, you probably get the idea for this point. So today, for this video, is about the fact that we're going to be continuing things on and move on to the second stage. That's what appears to be Rue's birthday scrapbook. So, obviously, as usual, we're able to gather as many of those honey pots as we could, and in addition to that, though, is about the fact that we're trying to able to avoid not only heffalumps, but also with certain wurzels as well. So we can pretty much guarantee about the fact that now, despite the fact that unlike the console version of the game, where basically though is about the fact that if you do manage to come across into not only heffalumps or wurzels, but the fact the matter is though, due to the handheld's limitations, this means that we can't really tell if Pooh's tummy was actually rumbling, unlike the console version of the game, that it does signifies about the fact that the actual tummy does rumble as soon as when heffalumps or wurzels might able to chase you around. So, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that you get the idea for this point. So, anyways though, a few things I want to talk about this, and that's what appears to be about the fact that, well, today's date of course there is the 7th of April today, in some cases in 2024 today, so generally speaking though, it's about the fact that according to the forms of the calendar, days left kind of routine, and that's what appears to be about the fact that I believe, if I recall correctly, we've only got about 46 days to go until Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Switch Remake is going to be approaching around that time, and you kidding me? I got cornered. Oh well, I suppose one was able to just try to go ahead and try to distract them by simply able to go the opposite direction, and there we go. Even though technically speaking though, unfortunately though, this is our first scared death of this playthrough, mainly because no matter what though, unlike in Piglet's big game though, there's no health system, so because of that though, yeah, you only have, technically speaking though, one health in particular, so again, if you manage to able to get in contact with the forms of not only basic heffalumps, but also with basic wurzels for now. Basically though, you're about to get scared immediately, so no matter what though, yeah, I can totally see why about the fact that there was no health system this time around, unlike in Piglet's big game does. So as a result, yeah, you get the idea for this point. So, and of course, just like the ones how it does on the console version of the game, there are a couple of times though about the fact that we might able to actually force to go into alternative paths that normally we couldn't get into. So because of this though, like for example, if we get into the final stage of the game, basically though is about the fact that we've got to be able to explore for the longest exploration that we can able to deal with. So yeah, you probably get the idea for that particular point, for that, you know, for that matter anyway. So, and of course, as we expected, we do need to talk to Kenga, so just in case we can able to actually, you know, try to able to actually proceed, because no matter what though, obviously Rue's birthday wish is obviously have a super duper bounce with the forms of Tigger himself. So because of that though, yeah, there's nothing right to home about. So, and as far as I do notice about this as well, about the fact that, oh wait a second, we do need to talk to Rabbit now, so exponentially we can now able to progress. So before we get on to that though, let me just go ahead and collect some more honey pots, so just in case if we do need to, you know, feed some more honey for the sake of certain bees and what have you, so everything else will be pretty much accounted for. So anyways, there's also another thing I should probably want to explain about this as well. Unfortunately though, I've no longer have myself not only Wii Sports Resort, but also with the forms of Wii Play as well. But that's just mainly because no matter what though, is about the fact that technically speaking though, I'm not exactly done collecting Wii games just yet. Mainly because no matter what though, as soon as I basically discovered something about the fact that I can still able to actually get some more Wii games for that matter, during at some point later down the road, because no matter what though, I can technically able to actually put in not only my Wii games, but also with my Nintendo Switch games on top of the forms of already stacked vertical cases, which you probably already know what I'm talking about, which as a result, yeah, it has been quite a few days since I actually discussed upon the forms of certain games that I still managed to have and no longer have them, although I still managed to able to have myself Wii Sports with me, just because obviously it's a launch title for the Wii, to able to demonstrate of how the Wii motion controls is actually has some huge capabilities of, which that could be also applies for Nintendo Wii U with the forms of Nintendo Land, which I still have even to this day. And in addition to that though, is about the fact that, well, relatively speaking though, in regards to the forms of the upcoming days ahead, that I can able to actually still able to guarantee to get myself Yoshi Touch and Go, to able to actually show the demonstration of the touchscreen's capabilities for the Nintendo DS, and as far as Pilot Wings result is concerned, obviously a full demonstration of the forms of the capabilities of the 3D effect comes into play. So yeah, you probably get the idea for that point. So anyways though, yeah, let's talk about the forms of the actual news that's been going on, in terms of the forms of not only gaming related, but also with the forms of certain films as well. First of all, we just want to point things out is about the fact that yes indeed, we got ourselves a actual teaser footage for the likes of the disappointing live action movie. That's what appears to be none other than Mufasa the Lion King, and straight to the point, I'm honestly still not a big fan of the visual design, especially noticeable it is virtually identical to the 2019 The Lion King movie, which I was really gutted by it. Especially noticeable because we've already on about this already ever since during the films within the past few months, but still, I'm not gonna see that movie because obviously that again with the lack of expressions, and on top of that, at least no matter what though, it's just for a teaser for starters though, so I could acknowledge about the fact that the actual trailer might come up at some point in the later months to come, which as a result, I'm still not going to be hyped about that film, because honestly, I can still able to be hyped about Sonic the Hedgehog 3 a lot more, just because I'm still basically excited to see the actual film sets decides to come into play, as well as from that, I'm still very curious to know about the actual specific surprises they're able to bring us, so even then though, you probably get the idea for that. So, and of course, we do need to talk to Gopher right here to able to actually get that particular shuffle out. So just in case we can able to actually try to get that particular next item. But of course, just like the console version of the game, obviously though, we need to be quick about it. Because obviously though, the time clock will show up. So everything else will become to expect. So anyway, yeah, let's talk about the forms of another topic at this point, and that's what appears to be about the fact that, yes, apparently though, we got ourselves the actual leak about the forms of Inside Out 2 sneak peek clip. And truth be told, I'm still very excited for it still, and in addition to that though, we also got ourselves our first image to able to show us the forms of the upcoming movie sequel, which appears to be Moana 2. And I'm a little bit optimistic about the forms of Moana 2. Like, on the other hand, it is so nice to see Moana is getting a sequel after all. Well, it was originally going to be by the forms of a Disney Plus exclusive series, but as it turns out, we're about to be getting a second movie instead. So because of that though, I'm perfectly fine with that, as long as it doesn't mess up with the forms of the script, alongside with the forms of anything else in general, much like the forms of how it does it on some Disney movie sequels, which one of those examples being Ralph Breaks the Internet was pretty disappointing in my opinion now, especially noticeable because they really did mess up with the forms of not only the character development, but it's also with the forms of the plot, neither with the forms of pop culture references, or in some cases though, product placements decides to come into play. So that makes absolute no sense to me, especially noticeable what makes the first film so great in the first place, usually Wreck-It Ralph. Basically though, it is super iconic in my honest opinion. So because of that though, because I'm a huge gamer and everything, so yeah, you probably get the idea for this point. So Oh, and every once in a while, though, is about the fact that if you managed able to explore new sections in 100 Acre Wood, basically, though, the background music actually changes a little. So, I at least fully appreciate about that, much like the forms of how it does it on Piglet's Big Game, on the Game Boy Advance anyway. So, because of that, though, yeah, we can now able to move on, and of course, we still need to dodge some more Woozles and all that stuff, so just to ensure we do definitely need to able to try to avoid them. And of course, we can never forget to mention about the forms of how the fact that sometimes the hit detection when it comes to like the actual environmental objects and all that stuff can easily get in your way. So yeah, I've already on about that ever since then yesterday though. So anyway, there's also another thing I want to mention about this as well, and that's what appears to be about the fact that yes indeed, oh, yeah, you see what I mean right there? Sometimes the honey pods can easily get stuck in between the forms of specific trees and what have you, so yeah, that's annoyingly consistent. Similar to the forms of how it does on the cookies from the likes of in the Piglet's Big Game, so no matter what though. Also, I just realized I did somehow manage able to do not obtain that honey pot as soon as I leave onto the next transition for the next segment of the 100 Acre Wood itself, so that's a bit unfair. So, anywho though, and thus not to mention though is about the fact that there was also one of those moments about the fact that, usually because of the forms of the low capacity when it comes to obtaining certain honey pots sometimes, this means no matter what though is about the fact that it is still possible you definitely need to collect quite enough of those honey pods, because otherwise if you off by a little amount of honey pods, then obviously you have to do the ridiculous amount of backtracking. Especially noticeable, it doesn't really help about the fact that, imagine if you will, if you still managed able to go yourselves the original cartridge version of the game back in the day on the Game Boy Advance version for the time, then obviously if your Game Boy Advance decides able to deplete its battery life, and if it dies completely, and if you're on full charge, obviously though you lost your progression, unless if you do need to remember the actual password combination. So that's a bit of annoyingly consistent, especially noticeable that was back in 2005 that is. So, and even then, what's even weird is that this particular game did came out around the time when the Nintendo DS is still around, so as a result, it's a little bit weird when it comes to the forms of gaming releases between with the forms of Game Boy Advance is still around during that time. Well, it wasn't until during the forms of let's just say sometime in 2007 if I recall, because obviously in 2007 that we somehow received Crash of the Titans on the Game Boy Advance, and as a result it's a 2D plane, and no matter what though, it just feels incredibly underwhelming. So, at least for I've looked at it anyway though. So anyways, let's just go ahead and double check what's beyond on this specific point right here. And as it turns out is that Tigger was asleep. So because of that though, we definitely need to wake him up. So just to ensure for the fact no matter what though, we do need to obtain those symbols. So yeah, that's the next objective we can able to go into next. So anyway, let's talk about the forms of another topic at this point, and that's what appears to be about the fact that, well, apparently so, that ever since in Journey forms have been the 1st of April, which is about, let's just say, 6 days ago, well, suffice to say, happy 45th anniversary of the existence of Nickelodeon. Ever since in Journey forms have been, well, it was founded Journey forms have been 1977, but it was launched until 1979, which as a result, that was roughly the exact same time as with the forms of James Bond movie called Moonraker decides able to release during that specific period, which as a result is almost inspired by Star Wars a little bit, because obviously Moonraker did came out 2 years after Star Wars A New Hope did somehow existence. So because of that though, strange release time schedule and all that stuff though, which I already know for a fact it's been quite some time since I actually have last mentioned something related to Star Wars during that specific period. So yeah, you probably get the gist of it. So either way, what's also interesting about this though is about the fact that until around that time, until by the end of this year in 2024, it will mark the 5th anniversary of the film's release of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, which as a result, despite the fact that it does have a lot of controversial opinions about that particular film, but usually, relatively speaking, we'll discuss more about it if we get onto the forms of by the end of 2024. Well, relatively speaking, it wasn't until whatever we get to later on, that is. So, either way, we did somehow use those symbols to able to awaken Tigger. And no matter what, though, is about the fact that we do need to help him out by simply able to talk to Rabbit, by trying to sort out with those switch combinations. So because of that, though, just like the ones how it does on the console version of the game, relatively speaking. So either way, and there's also worth noting for is about the fact that there's another thing I want to point out. Apparently, though, is about the fact that I know for a fact that a lot of people in the comments during the forms have been Retro Break YouTube channel, which as a result, a lot of people seem to get really upset about the fact that the Amlock Pocket has been sold out tremendously. Well, he did point out some good news he'd like to point out, is that Amlock Pocket, including Amlock Pocket Adapter, is about to be coming back, which as a result, no matter what though, it already did happen in Journey Forms have been around 2 days ago, since in Journey Forms have been the 5th of April, apparently speaking though. Although, let's face it though, unfortunately though, I don't think it's possible I can able to actually get that device though, just because, for one, it's ridiculously expensive, and two, I've already got myself not only the Game Boy Advance SP, so I can play those specific Game Boy games on the go, but also I can able to experience those a bunch of Game Boy games on TV on the forms of the Game Boy player. So no matter what though, you probably get the idea of what I was expecting for this point. So anyway, we somehow got ourselves the wooden stick, so that way we can able to actually release Tigger out of the forms of that specific hole, so that way we can able to actually free him. But here's the thing though, much like the forms of how it does on the console version of the game, something tells me about the fact that we might able to actually play as Tigger at one point, just like the ones how it does it in the, not only in the console version, but also with the forms of Piglet's Big Game, not only on consoles, but also on the Game Boy Advance version as well. So yeah, as soon as we get him out, obviously every once in a while, Pooh decides to able to get stuck into the forms of that specific hole there, so now we need to help him out. So just like the ones how it does it on the Game Boy Advance version of Piglet's Big Game, obviously though we can now able to take control of Tigger, where once again he's going to be on stealth mode. And as you can tell, the actual major improvements of this particular thing right here is actually become present here, where basically though is about the fact that as you can tell, unlike in Piglet's Big Game, that's basically though on the Game Boy Advance version that is, basically though is about the fact that you can't really tell about the fact that you actually stay away from that particular marker for the likes of the forms of not only for Heffalumps but also for Wurzels as well. Thankfully though, in Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly Adventure on the Game Boy Advance version this time, the actual markers is now actually shows up, meaning about the fact that you must able to avoid and just to let you know of when these Heffalumps and Wurzels are coming. So, and if you manage to get spotted, just like before, that obviously Heffalumps and Wurzels will come straight to you, and no matter what though, you have to restart that particular segment all over again. So, that won't be that fun though, especially noticeable in certain segments where basically though, if you are really close towards the end of that particular segment, and chances are though, you might get screwed over no matter what. So, but for the most part though, is about the fact that this entire stealth section is not too shabby for the most part, so you just have to be very careful not to get spotted by the forms of not only Heffalumps but also with Wurzels as well. So, anyway, there's also another thing I want to point out as well, is that apparently though, a new Matrix film is officially in the works. So, that's something worth classifying for noticing this, especially noticeable concerning for the fact that the original Matrix film is already going to be officially going to become 25 years old later down the road. So yeah, that must have been said something. So, and of course that Gopher has saved us, so thanks to the forms of Tigger of course. So naturally speaking though, is about the fact that if we think we are done here, well as it turns out we do need to backtrack for a little bit. And what is up with the forms of that little sprite animation with how Pooh got scared by the forms of either Heffalumps or Wurzels, because he just feels like he just managed able to spin around with the forms of that particular ballerina and stuff like that, which is a little bit odd. Well, relatively speaking, that was about the fact that, gee, no wonder why, that we've never actually seen that particular sprite animation for Pooh like that during the forms of in Piglet's Big Game on the Game Boy Advance. So, anyway, it is also worth noting for as well is that, for what I can gather, is that there's a lack of sound effects if you do manage to able to obtain one of those inventory items this time around, which I know it sounds a little bit odd to say this, because I already know for a fact that unlike in Piglet's big game, that it does manage to able to have the actual sound effects if you do manage to able to not only use one of those inventory items, but also obtaining certain items, which as a result, that doesn't seem to be the case this time around, unfortunately. Well, then again, it's probably because of the handheld's limitations or anything else like that. So I believe, something tells me we are basically done everything for the sake of the forms of Rue's birthday. So now, all we have to do now is just basically talk to Tigger right here. And as a result, once we're done with that, much like the console version of the game, well, basically, that's how it ends. So, and as a result, that particular image of Rue decides to able to jump for joy. That image is actually heavily borrowed from the Tigger movie, where they're trying to sort out with this massive boulder, which as a result, you probably get the idea what I'm talking about. So, yeah, that was about it for Rue's birthday, so nothing else I can really discuss upon. Well, aside from the fact that until tomorrow anyway, that Maxie will definitely gonna be able to be coming back onto Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, and hopefully he should be able to actually try to mention about the forms of another gaming related things later on. So now we can able to actually access to Tigger's birthday scrapbook right here, so this means we are pretty much onto the halfway point of the game already. I'm not kidding what I'm saying is, this particular version of the game is extremely short. So with that being said, we got the endings up here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly Adventure on the Game Boy Advance, as now we'll move on to Tigger's birthday scrapbook. So I'll see you guys in next Saturday. Later, fellas.